Aliens stunned by the human battleship. That defies all logic. The Valky came without warning. Admiral Drail had been watching the Fold space sensors for 3 hours when the readings spiked, and then 300 enemy warships materialized at the edge of the Cellin system like a storm that had been waiting just out of sight. He stood at the center of his command bridge and felt the weight of the numbers settle over him. His fleet had 72 vessels, good vessels, well-maintained, crewed by warriors who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. 72 against 300. He sent the distress call on every frequency the Cellin Alliance maintained. He sent it to the Arden Collective, who had 17 dreadnoughts and a long memory of Valky aggression. He sent it to the Thalassy Federation, who owed Cellin 3 treaties worth of mutual defense obligations. He sent it to the Marin League. The Cobalt conquered the unified Rim worlds and every independent military power within Fold space range. Then he looked at his tactical display and began calculating how long his fleet could hold. His comms officer, a young Cellin named Irath, turned from his station with an expression Drail had never seen on him before. Irath said the Alliance had a response, 1 ship human registry, moving to intercept at maximum fold speed, estimated arrival 14 minutes. Drail stared at him. Irath said it again, just the one, sir. The Valky fleet was already advancing. 300 warships in a formation. Drail recognized as a standard conquest approach, overwhelming force, no need for subtlety, a hammer blow that had worked on 12 systems before this one. Varek, the Valky fleet commander, was a patient enemy. He would not rush. He would let the math do the work. Drail looked at his tactical display and tried to think of what one human ship could possibly mean in a battle of these dimensions. The Fold space signature appeared on his sensors 14 minutes later, precisely on schedule. His tactical officer, Sela, was the first to read the data, and she was quiet for long enough that Drail walked to her station and looked at the screen himself. He told her to run the scan again. She ran it again. The readings were the same. The ship that had just entered the Selene system was putting out 4 separate power signatures simultaneously, each from a different drive type, each operating at a frequency that should have interfered catastrophically with the others. Its weapon systems were showing 6 separate targeting architectures. Its hull composition was reading as 3 different alloys in different sections. Its mass distribution was uneven in a way that suggested significant structural modification accumulated over decades rather than engineered in a single construction run. Sela said very carefully that it was not a standard vessel configuration. Drail asked what class it was. Sela worked her console. No exact match. In the registry, she said. Closest approximation was a human medium battleship designation, but the readings did not conform to any specific model. The hull appeared to have been rebuilt multiple times. She was reading components from at least 4 different ship generations. Drail looked at the vessel on his main screen as it came into visual range. It was not elegant. It was not the kind of ship you looked at and felt reassured. It was big in the way that something becomes big through addition rather than design. A ship that had grown rather than been built, repaired so many times, in so many ways that it had become its own category of thing. The name on the hull read UES Tenacity. A human voice came through the comms. Channel. Male unhurried with the specific calm of a person who has been in enough dangerous situations to have run out of fear responses. The voice said, Cell Command, this is Commander Nathan Cole, UES Tenacity. We have reviewed the tactical picture. Moving to engage the Valky fleet. Request you hold your current position. Unless I ask for support. Draal found his voice. He said there were 300 Valky vessels in this system. Cole said he could see that. Draal said he was one ship. There was a brief pause on the line. Cole said he had been fighting these people for 3 years. He knew their formation doctrine. He knew their targeting systems. He knew how their fleet commanders thought. Then he said to stay back unless he called. He said they would get in the way. The channel closed. Draal stood at the center of his bridge and watched the UES Tenacity accelerate toward 300 Valky warships with all the urgency of a ship that had somewhere important to be. Selen said he was not slowing down. Draal agreed. She said that ship could not survive a direct engagement with that fleet. Draal said he knew. He watched the Tenacity close the distance. He watched the Valky formation register the incoming contact and adjust. He watched Variks lead destroyers swing their weapons to bear. He watched the Tenacity fly straight at them and not stop. And then the shooting started, and the first thing that happened, the very first thing before any analysis could be run or any tactical conclusion reached, was that every single Valky shot missed. The Valky targeting systems were considered by every species that had ever faced them to be the finest in the known galaxy. They were built on predictive algorithms that modeled an enemy vessel's movement, power output, and structural behavior, then calculated firing solutions so precise that engagement ranges were almost a formality. In 300 years of Valky military history, those systems had never produced a sustained miss. They missed the UES Tenacity 17 times in the first 90 seconds of engagement. Sela was running diagnostics on her own sensors because the data was so inconsistent. She thought something was wrong on her end. Nothing was wrong on her end. The Tenacity was simply moving in a way the Valky algorithms could not model. It was not that the ship was fast. It was not executing the kind of clean, evasive patterns that a well-designed vessel produces, tight arcs, predictable rolls, maneuvers calculated to spend minimum time in a weapon's envelope. The Tenacity moved the way something moves when it is being flown by a pilot who is fighting the controls as much as operating them, producing micro corrections and course adjustments that had no clean mathematical signature because they were not fully intentional. On the Tenacity's bridge, helmsman Sam Holt had both hands on the controls, and his jaw set in the expression his crewmates recognized as the one he wore when he was in what he called the conversation. The Tenacity had 3 drive systems running simultaneously. The primary was a 5th-generation human fold and thrust drive installed during the ship's last major refit. The secondary was a 3rd-generation drive salvaged from a destroyed escort carrier and reinstalled by Chief Engineer Owen Drake's team over a very long weekend. The tertiary was something Drake himself had built from components over several years, which technically did not appear in the ship's official registry because It had never been formally approved by anyone. All three drives had opinions about direction. They did not always agree. Holt's job, the job he had been doing for 6 years on the ship, was to listen to all three opinions simultaneously and find the line between them that moved the ship where he needed it to go. The line was never straight. The line changed constantly. It produced a flight path that looked from the outside like a vessel in mechanical distress. From the inside, it felt like surfing, something that did not want to be surfed. Holt called out that the Voikai were adjusting targeting angle, lead destroyers off the starboard side. LT Laura Briggs was already on it at the weapons console. The Tenacity's weapons were as varied as her drives. The main forward battery was a pair of 7th-generation electromagnetic rail cannons that could punch through 3 m of composite hull plating without difficulty. The secondary battery along the port side was a mix of 5th and 6th-generation systems, which meant the power cycles did not match and the fire timing had to be manually offset, something Briggs had been doing for so long it was muscle memory. The prototype plasma battery on the dorsal mount was a project the manufacturer had officially abandoned 3 years ago. Drake had acquired the rights to it, installed it without formal authorization, and it had not destroyed the ship yet. Briggs fired the rail cannons in a sequence no automated targeting system would have generated, because automated systems optimize for efficiency and clean solution windows. She fired when the Tenacity's nose dipped on a secondary drive stutter, using the momentary alignment as an opportunity that existed for less than a second. 2 Valkyrie destroyers lost shields. One lost its main engine cluster. In the Valkyrie command ship fleet, Commander Varric studied his tactical display. He had fought over 40 engagements in his career. He had reviewed human military doctrine, human vessel design specifications, human tactical tendencies. He had prepared accordingly. He had not prepared for this. His tactical division reported that their targeting system was generating conflict errors. The system kept producing multiple simultaneous firing solutions for the same vessel because the vessel kept appearing to be in more than one predictable position at once, which the system interpreted as a data error rather than a target characteristic. Varric told them to switch to manual targeting. They missed 6 more times. He ordered full salvo fire, 3 destroyers together with overlapping fields. The Tenacity flew through the overlapping field in a path that should not have existed in the geometry his gunners had created, as if someone had found the one gap that pure probability should have closed and threaded it. Exactly. On the Selene flagship, Drail had stopped talking. His bridge crew had stopped talking. They all watching the main screen with the focused silence of people observing something they did not have words for yet. Sella said quietly that the Tenacity's power output had just spiked. She was rerouting from the life support secondary systems. Drail asked if she was pulling power from life support. Sella said from the redundancy systems. The primary life support was still running, but yes, the Tenacity came out of a banking turn, and the rail cannons fired again. A 5-shot sequence timed around the drive stutter that Holt had been using. As a turn component, it caught a Valkyrie cruiser mid-formation and hit it in 3 different sections within 4 seconds. The cruiser went dark. Drayle asked for a count. His tactical officer reported 7 Valkyrie vessels, confirmed disabled or destroyed in 4 minutes and 30 seconds of engagement. On the comms channel, a second human voice appeared, female clipped, professionally steady in the way of someone managing multiple things at once. LT, Briggs asked Sella in command to confirm whether their fleet had any vessels positioned at the 270 bearing. She said she wanted to make sure the Tenacity was not crossing in front of Allied ships. Drayle answered before his comms officer could. He said the bearing was clear. Briggs said she appreciated it. There was a brief pause with the sound of something mechanical clicking in the background. She said it was a nice system they had here. She said she was sorry it was in this condition. The channel closed. Drayle looked at Sella. Sella looked at Drayle. He said she had apologized. Sella said, yes, sir. He said the weapons officer of a ship currently engaging 300 vessels alone had stopped to apologize about the state of their system. Sella said, yes, sir. Drayle turned back to the main screen. The Tenacity was already repositioning. For a second pass, her uneven silhouette turning against the star field in a movement his tactical system was still trying to classify and failing. He said quietly to no one in particular, what are you? Deep in the engine section of the UES Tenacity, Chief Engineer Owen Drake was having a conversation with a power coupling that had been on his list of things to fix for 8 months. The coupling connected the tertiary drive to the port weapons power bus. It was not, technically speaking, a connection that the engineers who designed either system had intended to exist. Drake had created it himself, running a custom conduit between 2 systems that were never meant to interact, using a junction box he had built from components that came from 3 separate manufacturer catalogs. It worked. It had always worked. But it worked in the specific way that things built under pressure in inadequate conditions work reliably, right up until the moment they decided not to be reliable anymore. Drake watched the coupling's temperature reading climb. He told his assistant, Harry Webb, to hand over the number 4 thermal wrap. Harry handed it over without looking up from the secondary monitor he was managing. Drake rapped. The coupling watched the temperature reading plateau and moved on. This was engineering on the Tenacity. Not crisis management, not exactly, but a constant low-level negotiation with systems that were doing things they were not designed to do in conditions no design specification had accounted for. Crewed by people who had stopped expecting the ship to behave by the book and started expecting it to behave like itself. Drake knew every quirk. He knew that the number 2 drive ran 3% hotter than its rated temperature and had done so for so long that the surrounding insulation had adapted to it. He knew that the rail cannon port feeds had a slight delay that Briggs compensated for manually. He knew that the life support redundancy systems, when pulled to power the weapons during high-demand combat, produced a slight pressure variation on decks 4 and 5 that felt like a change in elevation and was completely harmless, but had startled more than a few new crew members the first time they felt it. He knew the plasma battery had a 60% chance of not failing if fired at full charge. He had been working on improving That margin for 2 years, he was still at 60%. On the bridge, Commander Nathan Cole stood at the center of his station in the relaxed posture of a man who had made peace with the things he could not control. He was 44 years old. He had commanded the Tenacity for 11 years, fought in 9 confirmed fleet engagements, 16 smaller-scale actions, and 1 incident that did not appear in any official record for reasons he did not discuss. He knew Volkite fleet doctrine from the inside. He had fought them 4 times. Before today, he knew that their targeting systems were brilliant and that they had one specific weakness. They were trained on vessels that behaved predictably, ships with clean power signatures, consistent drive outputs, and tactical behavior that followed recognizable patterns. The Tenacity had none of these. Cole asked Sam how the number 2 drive was doing. Holt said it was arguing. Cole said to let it argue and to use it. Holt said he already was. Cole checked his tactical display. The Vuokai had pulled 7 ships back from their forward line and were forming a new secondary screen. Varek was adapting, that was expected. But adapting to the Tenacity required forming a new model of what the Tenacity was, and that was not a quick process. When the ship kept declining to be consistent, Cole asked Comms Officer Claire Voss to open a channel to Admiral Drayle. Voss opened it. Drayle's voice came through immediately. He had clearly been waiting. Cole said he needed Drayle's sensor data on the Vuokai secondary formation because the Cellin flagship's angle was better than his from his current position. Drayle said he was sending it and then said he had to ask something. Cole said to go ahead. Drayle said his analysts were watching the Tenacity's power readings. Her drive output was inconsistent by a margin. Their model said should result in structural failure. Her weapons fire timing did not conform to any tactical pattern their systems recognized. Her flight path during the last engagement phase did not follow any evasive model in their database. He asked how she did what she did. Cole looked at the incoming sensor data. The secondary Vuokai formation was tightening. They were preparing something. He said she had been repaired a lot. Drayle said that was not an answer. Cole said it was actually just not the kind the analysts were looking for. He closed the channel. Drayle stood in his flagship and stared at the closed comms indicator. Then he told Sella to pull everything on. The Tenacity, construction record refit, history, engagement log, everything the human databases had shared with them. When the assistance treaty was signed, Sella pulled it and read it. She said the ship had been in active service for 47 years. She had been significantly rebuilt 4 times. Her current hull incorporated plating from 3 different ship classes. Her drive systems were from 3 separate generations of human propulsion technology. Her weapons were from 4. The tertiary drive system was listed in the registry as chief engineer. Modifications, classification pending, and had been listed as such for 11 years. Drahl said, pending for 11 years. Sella said yes. Drahl asked what that meant. Sella said she thought it meant no one had officially approved it and no one had stopped using it. She paused and added that the Tenacity's engagement record was extensive. In every recorded engagement, her tactical behavior was described by opposing forces as erratic, inconsistent, unpredictable, and difficult to model. Drahl said those were the words they used for a broken ship. Sella said, yes, but she kept winning. On the main screen, the tenacity was repositioning again, her drive signature, flickering in the way the analysts had stopped trying to interpret and had started simply watching. Drahl said she kept winning because she was broken. Sella was quiet for a moment, then she said that what looked like broken from the outside might be something else from the inside. Varrick made his decision. In 40 years of fleet command, he had learned that when a standard approach was not producing results, the answer was not to keep applying the standard approach with more force. The answer was to change the geometry of the problem. He signaled his 2 battle cruisers, the heaviest vessels in his fleet, to break from the main formation and circle wide, a flanking movement that would take 14 minutes to execute, but would position them at perpendicular angles on either side of the human ship. A vessel caught in a crossfire geometry had 3 options: run, fight one, attack her while the other fires freely, or be destroyed. His targeting system could not lock on the tenacity from one direction. It could not fail to find a target from 2 perpendicular directions simultaneously. He gave the order. Cole saw it within 60 seconds. He had been watching the Valkyrie formation shift throughout the engagement, reading Varrick the way you read someone you have studied carefully. Not just their moves, but the thinking behind the moves, the pattern of responses when a situation did not go to plan. He knew what flanking battle cruisers meant. He also knew exactly how long it would take them to get into position. He said, Owen. Drake's voice came from the engine section. I know. Cole said, the plasma battery. Drake said the plasma battery was currently sitting 60 degrees above its comfortable operating temperature because he had been feeding it supplemental power for the last 20 minutes to keep the targeting array running. If he charged it to full discharge capacity right now, the probability of it not catastrophically failing was, Cole said, 60-40. Drake said that was the baseline. He had not run the current numbers. Cole asked for the current numbers. A pause. Drake said he would rather not say out loud. Cole said his name. Drake said 55-45. In favor of it working, he said he would rather not. Cole said to start the charge sequence. He needed it ready in 8 minutes. Drake said he was afraid of that. The thing about the plasma battery was that it was not supposed to exist. The manufacturer had built 3 prototypes and abandoned the project when none behaved according to specification. 2 had discharged in uncontrolled ways during testing, which the engineers had described in their final report as a fundamental design flaw. Drake had looked at that report and seen something different. He had seen that the uncontrolled discharge was uncontrolled only relative to what they had intended. Relative to what it actually did, it was consistent. It discharged in a bloom pattern rather than a beam expanding outward from the focal point in an irregular sphere rather than traveling in a directed line. A conventional plasma weapon hit one target in one place. This one hit everything within a radius. It was impractical for a weapon designed to hit specific targets at range. It was extremely practical for breaking up formation concentrations. Drake began the charge sequence. He watched the temperature readings climb. He talked to the coupling quietly, the way he talked to all the ship systems in difficult moments, not asking them to behave exactly, just reminding them that he was aware of them and that he had come this far with them and he would appreciate it if they could come a little further. Harry Webb watched him and did not ask questions. He had learned early that Drake's conversations with the ship systems were not eccentric, they were professional. The systems seemed to respond to them. Harry had no engineering explanation for this and had decided to accept it. On the bridge, the 14-minute timer was down to 6. Holt said the battle cruisers were positioning, they would have firing solutions in about 4 minutes. Cole told Sam that when he gave the word he needed a full stop, not a deceleration, a stop. Holt said that with 3 drives running, a full stop was more of a strong suggestion than a guarantee. Cole said he knew. He said to make it as strong a suggestion as possible. Holt asked what they were doing. Cole said the plasma battery fired best from a stationary position. The bloom pattern needed a stable origin point or it lost coherence. He said they were going to stop in the middle of the formation crossfire window, fire before the enemy guns could track the position change and move before they recalibrated. Briggs said the window for that was about 11 seconds. Cole said 10 was fine. Briggs said 10 was not fine. Cole said her name. Briggs said yes, sir, and turned back to her console. The Selene flagship had been monitoring the exchange on the open tactical channel that Cole had never bothered to close. Drayle stood listening and felt something shift in his chest, not fear, not exactly, but the pressure of watching a sequence of events heading toward a conclusion that could not possibly work, narrated by people who were either supremely confident or had simply stopped calculating outcomes. His tactical officer said that if the plasma system fired at the angle the commander was describing with the spread pattern observed in the test data humans had shared during treaty negotiations, it would hit both battle cruisers simultaneously. Drayle said, if it fires without destroying the ship in the process. Sella said yes, if the battle cruisers locked into position. Cole asked Drake for status. Drake said it was charged. He said the temperature was fine. He said she would do it. Cole said Sam full stop. Holt pulled back on the drives in the specific combination he had learned over 6 years that produced something most closely approximating a stop. The 3 drives disagreed about direction so completely that they canceled each other's momentum, and the ship halted like a fist closing. For 2 seconds, every Valkyrie targeting system in the engagement zone went through a recalibration cycle because a vessel that had been in constant motion for 50 minutes had, without any warning, stopped moving entirely. Cole said, Laura. Briggs fired the plasma battery. The discharge was not a beam. It was a bloom, an expanding sphere of energized plasma that rolled outward from the Tenacity's dorsal mount and hit both battle cruisers at the same moment, inside their own weapons range. Both of them lost shields in a single pulse. The lead battle cruiser lost its weapons array, the second lost its drive system. Both were out of the engagement. Drake's voice came from below. Immediately, he said the battery was intact marginally. Holt said the drives were back and he was moving. The Tenacity accelerated out of the Crossfire window before the recalibration cycle completed. On the Selene flagship, no one on the bridge said anything for approximately 4 seconds. Then someone in the back of the room started applauding. It was a young sensor operator who had been watching the engagement since the beginning and who, in the enthusiasm of the moment, forgot he was on a military command bridge. Dryle did not tell him to stop. The Valkyrie fleet broke in stages. Varric held the formation together for another 20 minutes after the battle. Cruisers fell because Varric was not a man who accepted a single reversal as a verdict. He sent his destroyer wings in a rolling assault, cycling them in and out of range to keep the tenacity continuously engaged and give his targeting systems accumulated data to build new prediction models. It was a sound tactic. It was exactly what he should have done. The data his targeting systems accumulated was inconsistent. Every time a new prediction model was nearly complete, the tenacity did something that reset it, not as a deliberate tactical choice exactly. The ship simply could not produce the same behavior twice in a row because it was made of incompatible systems in constant negotiation with each other. And no 2 moments of that negotiation ever produced identical results. By the 40th minute of the engagement, Varric's tactical division reported that their prediction confidence for the human vessel was lower than when they had started. The more data they gathered, the less certain the models became. The ship was not adapting to them. It was not learning them. It was simply being itself, and being itself was something their systems could not accommodate. Varric sent the recall signal. It moved through the Valkyrie formation, slowly the way all retreats move, with the particular reluctance of ships that know what the signal means, but it moved. The formation began to fold in. Vessels pulling back to fold space jump range, and one by one the red marks on Drow's tactical display began to disappear. When the last Valkyrie ship folded out, Drow's bridge crew erupted. He let them. He stood at the center of the noise and counted the marks that had not moved. 41. Valkyrie vessels disabled or destroyed, still drifting in the Selene system. Then he looked at the 1 mark circling back toward his flagship, the UES Tenacity. She looked worse up close than she had at distance. Her hull was scored in 8 distinct places where Valkyrie shots had found her. One of her secondary sensor arrays was dark. The port side of her hull showed the slightly different thermal profile that Sela had noted at the start of the battle, the mismatched plating expanding and contracting at different rates now that the heat of combat was fading. She was venting a thin stream of something from a section near the aft compartment. She was also undeniably still there. Cole's voice came over the comms. He said the Valkyrie fleet had withdrawn. He said they were going to need about 6 days to put her back together before he could guarantee combat readiness. He requested permission to hold position in the Selene system. Drow said permission was granted, and then he asked permission to come aboard. A brief pause. Cole said she was a bit of a mess right now. Drow said he had to see it. Another pause. Cole said docking port 2 was functional and that Drow was welcome aboard. Drow brought Sela with him. He left the rest of his staff on the flagship because he had a feeling that whatever he was about to see, he wanted to process it with a small audience first. The docking connection established, and Drayle stepped from the clean, consistent, well-maintained corridors of his flagship into the Tenacity. He stopped after 4 steps. The corridor was functional, everything was clearly operational, maintained, cared for, but it was not uniform. The wall panels on the left side were a slightly different shade than the panels on the right because they were from different production runs. The lighting in the first section used a cool spectrum system, and then at a junction 20 m ahead, it switched to a warmer spectrum because that junction marked where 2 different generations of electrical infrastructure met, and the lighting was powered differently on each side. There were handwritten labels on 3 of the conduit junctions he passed. Neat handwriting, practical notes, not emergency repairs, just a crew that had found it more reliable to put information directly on the component than to depend on a registry system that had been through 4 rebuilds. Cole met them at the junction. He was wearing his uniform. There was a burn mark on his right sleeve from something that had shorted on the bridge. During the engagement, he shook Drayle's hand in the human fashion, which Drayle returned without difficulty. Cole said he would give the full tour, but Owen had half the engine section pieces right now. Drayle said he did not need the tour. He said he had questions. Cole said to walk with him. They walked toward the forward observation area, a small compartment with a wide viewport looking out at the star field and the distant shape of Drayle's own flagship. Drayle said the Valkyrie targeting systems were the most advanced in this region of space and that they had never consistently failed to achieve a weapons lock on a vessel the size of the Tenacity. Cole said he knew. Drayle said his analysts had spent the entire engagement trying to model the ship's behavior. They could not, because the tactics were complex in terms of formal structure, because the ship's behavior could not be reduced to a pattern. Cole said that was right. Drayle stopped walking. He asked how. He asked if it was deliberate. Cole looked at him. Cole said no. He said that was just what she was. He glanced down the corridor. He said every time they repaired her with parts that were not originally made for her, she got a little less predictable. The drives did not agree with each other, so Sam was always compensating. And the compensation looked like evasion from the outside, but it was just flying. Sorry. The weapons did not have consistent power cycles, so Laura timed her shots around the variations, and that looked like an irregular firing pattern from the outside, but she was just using what she had. He said the Valkyrie targeting system was designed to fight ships that behave the way they were built to behave, he said. The Tenacity did not behave the way she was built anymore. She behaved the way she was repaired. Drayle said she was 47 years old. Cole said yes. Drayle said he could have a new ship. Cole said he could. The implication sat in the air between them. Drayle looked at the handwritten labels on the conduit and at the 2 shades of corridor light and at the commander of a ship that had just driven 300 vessels out of his system, and he understood, with the precision of a man who had spent his career in military command, that there was no replacement for what 47 years of accumulated improvisation had produced. A new ship would be predictable. A new ship would have a clean power signature and consistent drive outputs and weapons that fired in patterns any sufficiently Advanced targeting system could model. A new ship would be easier to kill. Draal asked what Cole needed for the repairs. Cole said power couplings mostly. Thermal wrap for the plasma battery. Housing. Whatever their engineers had in the way of structural sealant that bonded to mixed alloy hull plates, because they had two types meeting at a stress point that needed attention. Draal said they would provide everything he needed. Cole said he appreciated it. Draal looked out the viewport. His flagship was visible in the distance. Elegant, symmetrical, a vessel built to a single design by a single engineering team according to specifications refined. Over 300 years of Selene military construction. He said he needed to report to his government. They would ask what happened. They would ask how one human ship did what no Selene fleet had managed to do in 3 years of fighting the Vasa. Cole asked what he would tell them. Draal said he would tell them the ship was 47 years old, that she was made of pieces from other ships, that her drives did not function the way drives were supposed to function, and her weapons did not fire the way weapons were supposed to fire, and her crew flew and fought by adapting to her failures rather than correcting them. He paused. He said he would tell them that the Vasi targeting systems, which could model anything, could not model something that did not behave according to its own design. Cole said that was accurate. Draal said it was not something his government would find easy to understand. They would want to know how to replicate it. Cole said they could not on purpose. They would have to fly the same ship for 47 years and repair her 112 times with whatever was available. And by the time they were done, they would have something like her. He looked out at his ship's scored and mismatched hull. He said it would not be the same anyway. It would be its own thing. He said that was how it worked. Draal was quiet for a moment. He said that when they sent the call, the Arding, the Thalisi, the Cobalt conquered, they had all calculated the cost and stayed home. Cole said he knew. Draal asked why Cole had come. Cole thought about it. He said they had received the distress signal. They snorts figured out what it meant. He paused. He said it seemed like the right thing to do. Draal looked at him. Draal said that was not a strategic justification. Cole said no, it was not. Outside the viewport, the Tenacity drifted, her crew already at work on her wounds. Lights moved along her scored hull where Drake's engineering team were out in suits assessing damage, making lists, beginning the long familiar work of putting her back together with whatever they had. She would never be pristine. She would never be elegant. She snorts would never, by any engineering standard anyone had ever written, make sense. She would be ready in 6 days. She would be the same impossible, irreplaceable, unclassifiable thing she had always been. And somewhere in the dark beyond the Selene system, the Vorkai fleet was running its data, building its models, finding the same error in every single one. Draal walked back through the corridor. Toward the docking point, he passed the handwritten labels again. He passed the junction where 2 conduit generations met in a coupling that looked improvised because it was. He reached the docking bridge and stopped. He told Sela to record a full report for the Selen Council. He told her to be accurate. He told her not to soften it or make it sound more logical than it was. She asked what he wanted as the summary. He thought about it for a moment. He said to write that they sent a call. For help, write that one human ship. Answered, write that it made no sense at all, and write that that was exactly why. It worked. She asked what classification to the vessel. Drawl thought about the two shades of lighting, the handwritten labels, the plasma battery, the commander with the burn on his sleeve who spoke about his ship the way you speak about a difficult and beloved old friend. He said to leave it as unclassifiable. The tenacity drifted in the dark outside. The viewport venting slowly already. Being repaired, already becoming more of what she was. Unclassifiable. Alive.